The views and opinions expressed by guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Forge Fitness and Nutrition LLC, the podcast hosts, owners, employees, contractors, partners, or affiliates. This presentation may include the use of explicit language. Listener or viewer discretion is advised. Hello and welcome to the Forge Fitness, Nutrition, and Habit podcast. I'm your host, Michael S. Parker, and in today's episode, we are going to be speaking on functional fitness and everyday health. But we're going to then take a contrasting look at how to manage neurodegenerative diseases. An emphasis would probably be on Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, and maybe even Alzheimer's. And whether it's you, a friend, or a family member that's struggling with this life-altering condition, this is an episode that you're going to want to stick around for. You don't want to miss it. Now, I am pleased to have a wonderful guest, Coach Milly Nuñez, a master personal trainer with advanced specializations working with those suffering from neurodegenerative disease. Milly and I have known each other for around 17 years. We met at Bryan University. We both worked as instructors and consultants, respectively, for the Advanced Fitness and Nutrition Science Department, and she has been part of the Forge family for 5 years. Milly, welcome, and please take a few moments. Tell us a bit about yourself, and then we're just going to dive right on in.
Sure. Thank you for having me, Michael. It's great to be here. And a little bit about myself. I have been a personal trainer now for coming up on 14 years. I was born and raised in California. I have a background in business, then later transitioned into personal training. And currently I'm living in Italy. So that was a big life change, but fortunately working with you and Forge, I'm able to continue personal training while I'm here doing other things like teaching English and getting to experience a brand new culture. So thank you.
It is so cool that we have coaches and clients from all over the world. It really does add to the opportunity for us, I think, as coaches to experience different cultures and the nuances of how they think about fitness and nutrition, and also a comparison between North America disease rates and European disease rates. They're very interesting.
Just seeing people, the lifestyles, what is on the menu, what you go out and see people eating or even doing for their exercise or just activity with daily living is quite interesting to see.
You've really kind of latched on to higher level specializations, which I'm all for. I think that's a great idea. But at some point, there was something fundamental that sparked your passion for fitness and nutrition. Would love for you to share with the audience, what is it that inspired you to alter from an MBA? And that's a pretty big transition into the world of personal training and coaching.
My journey as a personal trainer shifted and started from a personal level. I have always admired athletes. I've always been someone to watch sports. And growing up, I was active, but I never really felt I was athletic. So once I finished university, I wanted to get into shape. I started running, and by chance, I started a running program. It was called Running for Women. And then I became a volunteer as a coach because I really enjoyed the camaraderie, the support people received. And I started to feel more confident, more capable. And I met an amazing young personal trainer at the time. And she kind of put in my head, you know, your athletes really like you. You're really good at this. I don't need to coach you. You are someone that would be really great. And then I found Bryan University. And so it just took off from there. I haven't looked back since I started training, since I started coaching personally. I'm probably in the best shape I've ever been. Every year it gets better. And coaching is just, doesn't feel like a job. It doesn't feel like work. So I know I'm doing the right thing.
That's awesome. I have two questions on the back of that. The first one is,
Yes.
When you started at Bryan, that was back in 2007, give or take, but you started more on the administrative side. Because it was interesting because I was there at the time. It was very awesome to watch. I've seen that transition from you being in that business acumen into becoming one hell of a personal trainer. I just want to give you a little bit of praise on that. It was really cool to see that journey because now it's been 17 years, I think, that you've been coaching and training now. It's because you transitioned pretty quickly from the back end and right into the classroom.
Yes. So I was a student, and then I was taken on as someone to help on the administrative side because that was where I had my foundation, my education. I was working in an office, very organized. And then once I stopped being a student, then you started pushing me into the classroom, and it took off from there.
I know a lot of people who know you were very surprised to find out that you decided and were successful at being a figure competitor for one season. Tell me about that a little bit.
Yeah. While I was coaching, I was very focused on strength training and powerlifting. That's my passion, still is to this day. I had competed in powerlifting. My very first competition was Olympic weightlifting. So I've done a little bit of it all. And then I got curious to see, can you do a figure competition? Like you said, people who know me know that I'm very quiet. I'm an introvert. I'm very low key. So the thought of me going on stage, very little clothing, showing off my physique, very much out of character. But I was feeling I needed that push, not only for myself, but also as a point of reference to some of my athletes who might be, I can't do that. I've never tried that. Why would I attempt that? So that was the main reason I did it for myself, just to prove that if I really wanted to, I could accomplish something like that. And with the help of an amazing nutrition coach, I still keep in touch with her, Jenny Roberts. She's amazing. She's actually a strong woman competitor. She's awesome. Yeah, I ended up placing third, and it was amazing. It was also a way to kind of approach my 40th birthday. It was a couple years before, and I just wanted to prove to myself that I could do something like that.
I think that's a powerful story because it shows your ability to be agile in what you consider fitness and nutrition, which I think is probably what got you into studying some of the more, I would say, challenging kinds of clients to work with that really do need the help, especially if they're in post-rehabilitation for some of these terrible diseases that seem to be affecting people more and more. I do want to get into that, but before we do, just because it is interesting, people do make assumptions about you because you are quiet and you have a tendency to only say things that you feel really need to be said. Because we have a every other week meeting, you and I always find that we run out of time because we have so much that we talk about, and your insights are thought provoking and you have a unique perspective. But when they think of a high level personal trainer, somebody with your skill set and capacity, they probably make assumptions. And one of the things that we try to do with clients is to show them that we coach to their needs. We don't coach you based on what we believe is our need. So the drill sergeant or the overly aggressive coach or the coach that uses put downs or approaches that coaches have. What do you think is the biggest assumption that you like to disprove with people?
Yeah, I get a lot the drill sergeant, like, you just need to tell me what to do. Well, that's great, but if you don't do it, I can tell you in as many ways as possible. My approach is actually meeting them where they are. And if it's giving them that little extra support, that little extra push, I think sometimes we need to tell a person it's okay, but just get back on it. Like, don't snowball. We talk a lot in our meetings about the all or nothing. And I tell people, personal experience, professional experience, we can slide, but we never slide back that far. And we're still making progress. So it's just keeping that in mind, just getting past my trainer is going to push me until I break. Well, that's not the goal. The goal is to be able to maintain and continue doing what you're doing.
If you were to, just for fun, in 3 words, describe your approach, what would it be?
Yeah. So for me, it's persistence. And that to me means that you don't give up. You have a goal and it's not going to be easy. You move forward. Consistency. That's different than persistence. You can be persistent, but if you're not consistent, you have to keep doing it day to day. And balance. So again, trying to fit everything in. And one discovery I made is balance is, in my opinion, kind of like this unicorn. It's this great thing that we all want to acquire, but it's never really there. You can't reach balance and forget about it. You have to constantly be working for it.
I'm glad that you brought up the balance thing. We hear it a lot from our clients. We hear it in the industry. We hear, oh, you have to have work-life balance. You have to have family-life balance. I started to think about how that's borderlining fallacy. There's no such thing as balance because we don't really have full control of our lives despite how hard we try. That was just a useful way for people to understand that they have to have some balance in their life in order to meet the 3 criteria that you put together. And all of those things are predicated on having a balanced approach to your life. I just came up with work-life boundaries. What happens is we have giant problem with prioritization, especially in the Western world. We tend to prioritize the easy fix, the gratification. That's very easy to prioritize. I guess it's just the way that people procrastinate in general. If you look at procrastination patterns, they always do the easy stuff first and they save the hard stuff for last, and they just procrastinate that out indefinitely. So I think that's really interesting. Well, let me transition this real quick too, because you mentioned your age. I have found that one of the cool things about Forge is we do tend to attract people who are slightly older, I think, in general. You go to our website, it becomes very obvious that we have a different approach than the average fitness company. We don't use before and after pictures. There's a whole reason. We don't do that because it's disingenuous, and that is not your body. You shouldn't be comparing yourself to other people. We'll do a whole nother segment on that in another podcast, but I just want to bring it back to age. How should someone adjust their training as they get into their 40s and their 50s and their 60s?
Well, I have found that we should train for our age, meaning that we can't think back to, well, I used to when I was, this is what I used to do, because our bodies, whether we like it or not, are changing. Since working at a retirement community, they always have this image. We have that saying of everything's going downhill at this age. I think I've been hearing that since my 30s, and I'm still defying that. I'm like, no, don't tell me that. So I think we need to train for our current abilities, our current goals, and push from that place, because we can't expect our bodies to do something that they are physiologically not able to do anymore. And we need to keep pushing the limits that we have, or even approaching new ones, or relearning things that maybe we left a long time ago. So I think it's a matter of each person finding where they are at their age, whatever number that is.
Well, that's something that I've always focused on for myself, is to anti-age. The
Right.
only thing that gives me away a little bit is obviously I have a lot of gray and silver in my hair and my beard. So I've made the decision not to dye it, but to embrace it. I feel like I'm getting better as I age. I like to consider myself a fine wine.
Yes.
So as I age, I get better and better and better. But you bring up something that's interesting about training for where you're at, even if age being the dominant factor here. Do you feel like people set themselves up for failure when they're, say, in the aging population group, let's say 40 plus? And do you feel like maybe there's just so much information out there, and most of the mainstream information is either fad-based or it's inappropriate for their condition? Do you feel that that just is one of the things that perpetuates people into fitness failure, and maybe why we've seen a decline?
I think so. I hear a lot of people say, well, I can't do that. I'm this old. Or even in the case of working with older adults, my family doesn't want me to do this. They're concerned. And so I came to the realization that a lot of times people have this fear of reaching a certain age and not wanting to go to the gym, not wanting to do a certain exercise because they think their body can't handle it. They're afraid they're going to get hurt, or they've never even tried that exercise, or they have this idea that only younger people do that activity, or I can't lift that weight. It's too heavy for me. I shouldn't lift that anymore. I can't squat. It's going to hurt my knees. Well, you sit down and you stand up every day. If we look at the mechanics, we're squatting, correct? So sometimes giving a person that simple comparison, it, takes away that fear or that misinformation that they're taking, because people sometimes just don't even want to try anything, even though it's what they need. So that's where we come in, I think.
True. Have you noticed a difference in the way that people 40 plus behave about their fitness and nutrition in Italy or Europe versus the United States?
At least in the part of Italy where I am, the people that I see in the fitness gym, a lot of them are going towards a certain look. But I think in general, the people I see going about their day to day, it's a very active lifestyle. People walk very, very much. The grocery stores are full every day. We don't stockpile food and get it out of boxes. Every day you have fresh fruit, fresh pasta, fresh meat getting picked. So really the mindset of I need to exercise to be healthy, I don't think that's quite the priority. I think in the United States, we take the approach of exercise will fix it. We must exercise, where we don't enjoy it. We're trying to use it to solve a problem because our lives are sedentary or because we're not eating healthy. And here, the gyms, can be something functional, can be something because we're trying to improve our appearance for one reason or another. But here, exercise is a complement to the lifestyle. It's not what is going to be the lifestyle.
The way that most Europeans approach fitness, at least in their mindset, is quite different from the typical American. I've noticed working with my clients throughout France, Italy, and the UK, not so much. I would say it's more the European side. There is definitely a different mindset around fitness. One of the things that I have noticed is there's been a lot more questions or emphasis on resistance training. It's not the same American style of resistance training. It's definitely, as you had mentioned, a lot more functional. But maybe that's a nice transition to resistance training and age. What is, in your estimation, one generally underrated reason that everyone should be strength training aside from obviously strength and aesthetics?
Our activities of daily life, being able to just know that you can carry your own groceries, that you can walk up the hill and you have the strength in your legs, that you can move your own furniture, adjust your own things. Again, having spent the last few years before coming online with older adults, my favorite stories were when they would tell me, I just went to, the nursery and I picked up bags of sod and I had never been able to do that. Or I could tell the person at the store, no, thank you, I've got it. And these are older women in their 60s or 70s saying, I was able to put everything into my trunk. Those are the stories I like. And that's why I think strength training is important, because it keeps you capable of continuing your activities of daily life.
That's a lovely example as to why people should be strength training. I have just a quick story that I like to use for myself about strength training, which is that Heather and I used to do a lot of backcountry when we lived in the Tahoe area, Tahoe, California. Well, we were on the Nevada side. We were out almost every single weekend. We used to do long backcountry trips. We got 3 or 4 days. We had a blast. Desolation Wilderness out there is beautiful. One time we were hiking out. I probably had, I'm going to say 45 to 55 pounds on me in my backcountry pack. We're going to be out for 2 nights. And it was a pretty treacherous trail that went through almost every terrain that you would find in the Sierra Nevadas, from the deep wooded to the rushing rivers to the near vertical granite slabs that go on for a mile, an elevation that is pretty staggering under a very short period of time. So you're on inclines. So pretty exhausted. One time we went out to our favorite place that was very secret, and it was a lot of it was off trail. And we had gone out there when it had been a very rainy season. We stayed out there. It was a really lovely time, and it was time to come home. But we're out quite a distance. I think we're 11 miles out, and the packs are relatively heavy. And on the trailhead to go back down into the Tahoe Basin, we had to go through some pretty treacherous terrain. And there was some water features that shouldn't have been there because of all this seasonal flooding. And the normal pathway had a rock on one side, a very sheer rock on the left-hand side, a small pathway, and had a drop down into a river. And this river was violent at this time. And as we're scooching along the rock to get by, I somehow, some way lost my footing. I think my pack kind of scraped against the rock and it just threw me off balance. And I hit my ass and I slid down the side of this bank of the river, which is granite. And I went feet first into the water, and a tree that had broken and was down there went through my leg. And I just remember knowing immediately that something was wrong. And then when I was trying to get up, I couldn't get my leg out. And I looked down and I could see where a branch was in my leg. And I was like, well, this is going to be a lot of fun. I did rip it out. And of course, you have to give Heather some, kudos, because she's used to me being hurt all the time. Well, anyway, she didn't notice because she was ahead of me. And so she had crossed and she was fine. And so I pull myself up and I walk over. And as I'm going across this other part of the river, I'm noticing that between the impact of the fall, the impaling of my left leg, then just the fatigue of it, that I was kind of like shaky and wobbly in my knees. I was like, oh, dang. Well, anyway, I get across this other part of the river and I walk up to her and I say, listen, I said, don't freak out, which to her immediately says, he's hurt. And so I show her my leg and she says, you're kidding? Oh my God. She's like, what are we going to do? I said, well, let's clean it. So Heather always has a first aid kit. We take care of what we need to. But I'm oddly exhausted for something that seems so benign. I mean, it was a 10-foot fall and it wasn't quite vertical, but it was jarring and it hurt. And now I'm bleeding. I thought we were going to be in the clear, but what ended up happening was, to get back, we had to go across this log that was about, I'm going to say it was probably 12 feet to a granite island, and then another 5 feet over another log. And underneath it is this extraordinarily raging river. And here I am having to place one foot in front of the other and balance with this new injury. And that was the first time that I had ever doubted that I wasn't strong enough for something simple like that, because I got on there and my legs started shaking. And I wasn't afraid. Well, I started to become afraid. I mean, it was a fatigue. It was a deep fatigue. And so I actually make it to the little island part. And I told her, I said, I need to take a rest. My legs are burning. They are on fire. I don't know what is wrong. I get to the other part of the log where I have to like jump over, and I barely made it, Millie. I barely made it. And hindsight being 2020, I should have taken my pack off and thrown it across to her. But what I wanted to make the point is that if I had not been fit and I was just out there having a leisure time, I wonder how much worse that could have gone. Because for a guy who's very, very avid hiker with very strong legs, I could go in some pretty tough terrain for a very long time. We hiked Half Dome in 6 hours from Curry Village to the top and back down again in Yosemite National Park. The average time that somebody spends on that hike is 13 hours. And I think about this all the time. And I remind, especially my aging clients, that strength training can save your life. It can help you in situations where if you aren't fit, I want to drive this point home about strength is about sustainability of functionality in your life forever. I just found really sad, I think, was this woman is on CCTV. This woman is getting out of her car, and she's overweight, like an average American. 7 out of 10 Americans are over fat, and I'm rounding up, but 5 out of 10 are obese. So it's a high probability that she's not working out. And so she takes her child out of the car seat and puts it in the stroller, and then she's futzing around in the trunk, and her stroller starts rolling down the hill of this driveway towards rushing traffic, like a very, very high, busy street. She turns and she sees it, and she starts running, and she trips and she falls after about 3 or 4 steps. She tries to get up. She trips and she falls. She could not get her body off the ground, and her baby was rolling and rolling and rolling. And right as it's about to get into the street, you see this guy come streaking by, and he grabs the stroller just in time. I don't know if you've seen that video.
No.
Yeah, it's alarming. I don't recall how often she fell, but I know this: if that guy hadn't been there and interceded, who knows what would have happened, because she was not going to get to the child in time. Now, look, I don't know if she had any pre-existing conditions. I don't know if maybe she had just broken her ankle a month before. I don't know any of those things, but I do know that she did not look like she was a very strong lady based on at least her physical appearance. A reasonable assessment, not a judgment. That's an assessment. And that really has bothered me. It stuck with me. And I think about that for myself, that I'm going to constantly be in a state where I'm going to want to be as strong as I possibly can, because I don't want to get stuck in the middle of the wilderness at 3,500 feet, 11 miles from the nearest medical center, because I'm too weak to do it. And I don't want to be in a situation where I'm not able to protect my friends and my family, or even myself, because I don't have the strength in a functional capacity to do it. And so I'll transition out of that. Anyway, since we just talked about strength, why don't we talk about arthrokinematics, especially since we're talking about the older populations? Let's get into joints and then the mobility that surrounds those. Explain to folks the role that mobility and joint health play and how you like to approach that.
Sure. So I loved that you had that question for me, because I tell people, if you can't move, you can't increase your strength. You are not maximizing the potential for your strength. Your range of motion will dictate how much of your muscle you are moving, you are strengthening, you are shortening and lengthening, and it's going to then manifest itself in your movement. A very common for the aging population is reaching overhead. A lot of people will tell me, oh, my arms are just very weak. I don't have any upper body strength. But this is their range of motion. And that is where I start, because they want to say, I need to get stronger in my upper body, but they don't have any mobility in the upper body. So mobility is key. Before I strengthen, you need to be mobile. And I think that's something people sometimes don't know, haven't understood, have never been told. And when they start to realize that they don't necessarily need to lift more, if you move more, you're stronger because now you are recruiting more of your muscle tissue. The first thing that strengthens is the nervous system because now we are recruiting more muscle fiber. So before the muscle starts to grow, we need to call it to action. And I think that's important. And that's where my training begins.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The neuromuscular facilitation is then preceded by mobility. Mobility moves into flexibility, flexibility to stability. Stability moves into either maximal strength, hypertrophy, or force production and power. Then it moves into skill like athletic development, sports performance, plyometrics, and things like that. And I call that the 6 steps fitness hierarchy. And you had said something that I just want to reiterate is that you don't want to layer strength over dysfunctional movement patterns because the person that pays is the joint. The joint always pays the price for what you're doing to your muscle. And if you have, as you were saying, your length, tension, relationship problems, you're not maximizing motor unit recruitment or you're not maximizing the potential of the joint. And in fact, because of the malalignments, you could do yourself some pretty good serious damage. That connective tissue, the ligaments and the tendons, and then the fascial bandings around that encapsulate the joints, they all can suffer from having poor mobility. Do you find it challenging to convince people that mobility should be part of their program?
It's not challenging once you show them. When you actually have them experience that mobility, then leads them simply to be able to do something better, then they really buy into it. So it's not challenging if you can give them a simple task and then they realize, oh, okay, now I know why I need to do it. I have had a lot of clients who never stretched before or after, tried to do anything for mobility. And once you just have them try it and then have them go do a strength training exercise and they realize, oh, that was easier. Oh, that felt better. I didn't feel XYZ after. Then that is when they no longer question the mobility and they'll remember to stretch.
I think people are kind of surprised to find out that their force production capacity increases when the joint is aligned correctly.
Yes.
Just literally by having better posture, you become stronger.
Yes.
It's simple. It's biomechanics. It just has everything to do with levers and pulleys and leverage. I'm really glad that we discussed that because I think that in one way, I'm highly critical of social media. There's no doubt about that. Everybody knows this who's talked to me for more than 5 minutes. But there's one trend on social media that I'm all behind, and that is this move towards mobility, myofascial release, proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation, or PNFR. All of these modalities that would have never been considered to the average gym goer are kind of staples. Almost everybody's got a foam roller now. The percussion guns are becoming more popular, and I'm all about it. Those are some of the trends I like seeing on social media. Since we're talking about aging population, this is probably a good segue into some other questions that are a little bit more detailed around some chronic disease and what that looks like and how do people contend with that, not only for themselves, but if you have a family member, a friend, understanding what they really need. So I guess a blanket question is, can fitness really help prevent or slow down age-related conditions?
Absolutely. Again, like we talked about earlier, the body is on a downward trend. We age, things start to slow down, things start to change. But exercise generates new connections. So the neurons in the brain are firing, they're making new connections, they are recruiting different muscles. Your movement can improve, you remain functional longer because you don't lose those connections. Lots of studies have shown. I just had a discussion, a support group yesterday with Parkinson's, and we were talking about how exercise slows down the progression of this neurodegenerative disease because the body keeps producing more connections. People can relearn or create new connections. So I think it's essential for exercise to prevent and to improve things in the body.
I've been doing a lot more research on these conditions because they're seeming to become more prevalent. And I don't know if that is, well, the statistics show that they are, but I think in some ways we are noticing it more because it's talked about more. But aside from the awareness factor, we are starting to see more instances of these chronic diseases popping up, and the research is supporting it. Let's talk about Parkinson's particularly. You keep talking about neuromuscular facilitation, and people may not understand what Parkinson's is. But can you talk a little bit about how movement supports the brain health and neurological conditions, and how that specifically works with, say something like Parkinson's, just so people have a better understanding of what it is?
Sure. So with Parkinson's disease, we have a chemical in our body, dopamine, which dopamine is neurotransmitter that will send signals to the body to initiate movement. With Parkinson's, we start to see rigidity, loss of movement. Not everyone in Parkinson's has the same symptoms or the same progression of the disease, but we do know that there's certain things that will happen. Rigidity, loss of balance, loss of posture, all of those things. With exercise, we can continue with the dopamine that is produced, connecting from the brain to the body, to the muscle, recruiting the muscle, keeping those connections, rebuilding some connections. So the body having to, for example, make the movements larger will slow down the progression. The progression of the disease is minimizing the movement. If you continue to train and enlarge these movements, exaggerate them, the body will continue with its functionality for a longer time. It's amazing to see people that can come in with a walker, but you have them come in and start to exercise and they can walk normally. You give them a target. For example, having done rock steady boxing, I have people running, which is magical, is the word I use to express it, because they forget. But once they are not asked to do these exercises, these movements, they go back to their other pattern, but there's slight improvements. Again, the exercise connection there, the muscles keep that movement. They continue to get the messages, because if the muscle is not recruited, it starts to atrophy and we start that rigidity and the progression continues.
Yeah. So scary to a lot of people to hear these kinds of things. And you know, you see very popular figures. I really like Michael J. Fox. Maybe it's just because I'm an 80s kid, but watching him struggle with the disease the way he has, I think people get scared by that. What advice do you have for somebody who's dealing with a scary health diagnosis like that, and they're feeling unsure of where to even start? What do they do?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing I've told people, because I have been someone to work with someone and tell them after they've been diagnosed, and I tell them to realize they're not alone, to ask questions, to not believe what you see, because again, what we usually see is the worst case scenarios, and we hear all of the negative outcomes of some of these diseases, but you can alter the progression of your disease. I'm not saying it won't be difficult, but you can do something to personally feel better as far as your fitness, mental. You can do something. And it's also important for you to ask questions and involve your family, build a team, build a support network. So don't take the diagnosis and close the book. Go out there and keep going and keep trying to make progress.
Let's say somebody has had this diagnosis already and it's been a period of time, and they fell into the depths of despair, and they have been wildly inactive, and they're hearing this, or somehow, some way, they want to begin moving again, but there's been a long period of inactivity. What's a safe and effective way for them to restart?
I would say look for a professional, look for someone that you can talk to, whether it's occupational therapy, physical therapy, or if you find a personal trainer that's certified and is familiar with your diagnosis, and have an assessment. Talk to them, have them look and see, where are you? What can you do? What do you want to do? What can you realistically move towards? What can you improve? There's a lot of different methods, different classes, different exercises that you can do to feel better, to improve. So there's never an ending. There's always a new beginning. You just need to find it somewhere.
How would you approach your training structure with someone who has physical limitations, or in addition to that, fear about incurring greater or exacerbating an injury?
If I'm working with somebody that has a fear or has some sort of limitation, I talk to them. I always explain to them This is what we're going to do. I have them just show me something that they are able to do. And then I raise the bar a little bit more and a little bit more. I'll give you an example. I always go back to the overhead because it's one of the more simpler ones. And I do something as simple as, here's a stability ball. Can you roll it up the wall? Before we know it, they've reached a new point because they're not thinking about their arm. They're thinking about the ball and where they get the ball to. So that has been taken away that fear, right? And I'm watching them to see if there's any physical hesitation because we can sometimes see if there's a reaction, maybe of some pain, but they're still focused on their goal. So that's something where we can watch. If there's someone that has a fear of maybe sitting down and standing up by themselves, you give them a support and then you have them do it with some assistance and then slowly start to see where the instability is, where that fear is coming from. Is it on the actual not having the support from the hands? Is it in the knee stability? Is it the placement of the feet? So that's where I start. And then I start making small adjustments and never asking them to do more than they're ready for.
People sometimes just think that it always requires progressive overload and you got to be adding more weight. And I think that it can get very, very noisy with all the different information out there. But I feel like anybody who's listening to this that is either suffering or knows somebody who's suffering is that Milly had just said that you're not out of hope. There is a way that you can progress and you can improve the quality of your life through some very simple things. I feel that's very powerful and people should remember that if you are ever in a situation where you're either unfortunately diagnosed with something like this or you're in a position to help somebody who has been. We should talk about nutrition, because nutrition is vital for longevity and energy. Tell us a little bit what some of the foundations for an energizing and anti-inflammatory way of eating.
For those types of diets, for that type of nutrition, if you want to avoid inflammation, if you want to, eat well to maintain balance, you want to eat fresh. You want food that your body can break down, that your body can process, that is going to supply energy, that is not going to tax your body in any way, meaning that you don't feel exhausted after a meal, having to digest something heavily processed or overeating protein. That is hard to break down in the body. And if you're not using it for muscle building, it's not going to waste, but it's taxing your body in the breakdown of it. It's not going to providing energy. It's not going to refilling your muscles. If you're not strength training, you're probably doing something that requires more endurance. So you want to have some energy sources, quick go-to energy sources. And again, I refer back to Parkinson's because that is one of my areas of specialty, but your diet can also influence if you're taking medications, how the medication is absorbed in your system. So it's important that we know what we're putting into our body, tying into the inflammation. If we're putting our bodies under stress due to a disease, due to exercise, why do we also want to add foods that are going to increase the inflammation in our bodies? Those are things that we need to consider. And as we're sitting here sipping water during our conversation, water is something that is overlooked very much with the aging population. People sometimes have the fear, I will say it, of I need to go to the bathroom more often, but not if you're using the water in your body to keep your muscles fluid, to keep your blood fluid, to hydrate your body. But that's something I constantly do with my clients, my athletes. I'm a water pusher. I say, like, any chance I get, did you drink your water? After a set, make it a habit, drink some water. Sometimes they would look at me like another water break because I knew their habits. I knew at home they would not be drinking water. That is also going to help with the inflammation. We need to keep the water circulating to help the blood circulate.
Foods that I like to recommend to clients looking to have a low inflammation lifestyle. The first one that I always go to is olive oil. Olive oil, oily fish, nuts, walnuts, berries, turmeric, avocado is one of my favorite. Broccoli. There is one thing I want to say, some chocolates. It's got to have a percentage of cacao. I believe it's 75% or more. Onions. Those are very high anti-inflammatory foods. You want omega-3 fatty acids because they have one of the highest level of anti-inflammatory effects. I want to transition kind of back into when you're talking about nutrition, it's so easy for people to become overwhelmed there's so many different approaches and there's so much noise about what's the right thing to eat. But I think aside from the misinformation and the overwhelming amount of information, there is another factor that we have to deal with, which is that people tend to be resistant when it comes to balancing eating for health without feeling restricted.
Yes.
How do you deal with that when people feel restricted?
Let me start with myself coming from, my family's from Mexico. Food is us. Food is our culture. There's no get together without some great food. And so when you start to think about nutrition, people say, well, how do you still eat that? How do you still eat this? And I can't give that up. I don't want to give that up. Oh, don't ask me to stop eating. Well, we're not asking you to stop eating certain foods. We're asking you to think about when you're eating it, why you're eating it. Is it what you need at this moment to accomplish your goals? If you're asking for nutritional advice, I think when people reach that point, they want to change something. And so I'm sure you've done this too. At least I tell people and say, well, what are you doing that you're not happy about with your nutrition? Because most people, we know what we want to change. So when they are concerned about having a restrictive diet, you're already asking me for advice. So we know there's something that needs to change. It's not a restriction. It's a change we need to make. Changing the perception about what we're doing and what we're putting into our bodies. It's not restriction, it's change. And the change should be a positive one. If you're going to already classify it as a restriction, as something negative, as you've said earlier, you're setting yourself up for failure. You're already telling yourself it's something bad. Nobody wants to do something they're not going to enjoy or have a positive approach to. So let's stop saying it's a restriction. Let's make it a change and find a way to work that way.
It can be sometimes frustrating to have to deal with not only all the information that people have access to, most of which is incorrect, but then also have to contend with their resistance.
Yes.
And resistance is sometimes unnecessary. When people say restricted, I say, what do you mean precisely? And what I'm always dismayed to find is that they don't want to cut out the foods that are actually the most harmful for them because they're typically not real foods. They want to continue eating ice cream and cake and pastries and cookies and candies, foods that actually don't exist unless they're manufactured. Eating whole foods is without question the most sustainable and healthy way to consume. And I get frustrated with the media and how it portrays diet. And that's now a term that is no longer its original intent. It used to mean, what do you eat was your diet. You have a diet of, and then the list of food sources. Now diets have been commercialized. We just filmed a podcast yesterday and this came up, so I'll just reiterate it here, which is you can always tell a fad diet when it does three things. It highly restricts your calories. It demonizes one macronutrient, and then it overemphasizes another macronutrient. And when you have those three things combined, you're being sold. The reality is that a moderate intake or eating towards your particular need or your goal in conjunction with whole foods is really the only diet that we should be pursuing. And here's the thing. It's not restrictive if you change your mindset. So Milly, you nailed that. We have a problem with addiction. Restriction doesn't necessarily mean you can't ever have it. It just means that now you need to moderate it. I want to be clear about this. Social media also says, oh, moderation is key. Well, yeah, but moderation is key in variation. So what does that mean? Well, my moderation would be certainly different than somebody who's 5'1". I'm just shy of 6 feet. I weigh nearly 200 pounds. It's not going to be the same for somebody who weighs 120. There's different ways to moderate because there's calorie consumption, then there's your hormonal response to the food type, and then there is certain tastes and preferences. One of the things that I've worked very hard to do over the years, I'm very happy that I'm now, 6 or 7 years in, I do not eat added sugar. It's not part of my diet. It's probably one of the best health decisions that I've ever made for myself. And it was very challenging. But here's something that's interesting. Nobody believes me when I say it, but I'll go get Heather right now and I'll have her tell you, I don't mess up on my food. I don't have problems with eating. It does not affect me the way it affects almost everybody else. I really am comfortable with my food. I don't overeat my calories. I don't have unnecessary cravings towards processed foods. I make everything from scratch. Our breads are made from scratch. Our pastas are all homemade. If you follow me on Instagram, you see me, I'm always rolling out some kind of pasta from scratch. And the source of the ingredients are all quality whole foods. So people are always surprised that I eat pasta 3 times a week. They're like, how do you do that? I would be just gigantic. And I'm like, because I'm not eating the same kind that you are. And I don't eat the same portion that you do. So that's another thing. But there is this misconception that in order to be healthy, you have to feel deprived and restricted. And that's simply not true. What you have to do is change your mindset about what food really is, because you have been lied to about what food is. And I hate to say it, but the government has something to do with that, and lobby interest groups, and the list goes on. The problem is that we have been given a food source that's tainted, and we're not doing well with that. You know how we know that? Look at the disease rates in the United States compared to Europe. You know how else we know that? What's the obesity rate in Europe? I just wanted to give everybody a little bit of hope that, you know, you don't have to be restrictive and you don't have to feel deprived. You can have a very, very lovely dietetic intake. I eat pasta. We home make pizza. All of these things are reasonable. The only thing that we are very careful about, other than the other groups, we're also very careful about our animal-based products. We don't buy from grocery stores. We usually will buy from butchers who source local. That's where we choose to go and get our food. I have my own personal reasons for that. I'm not trying to say something negative about people who buy from a grocery store an animal product. I'm in a different situation. I have stuff around me in rural Texas. I can get access to very fresh bison. We live on some acreage, and one of our neighbors about a mile that way is a full bison farm. So those are things I have access to that not everybody does. Sometimes you have to eat within what you have. But I just wanted to clarify that all of these things you can still consider a whole food. A chicken breast that is raw that you cook is way better than a chicken breast that you're microwaving that's in a prepackaged meal. Yes. So that's my point. You had mentioned something about Mexico, and of course you speak Spanish, you speak English, you speak Italian, and you've lived in multiple places. But I want to come back to that heritage comment that you made. What is that one familiar meal, that one thing that you're not going to give up? I want to show people that you can still have these incredible things because it has some kind of, what would you call that? An emotional tie?
Yeah, absolutely. My mom's tamales. We make them as a family. It's a process. We're like a little assembly line for Christmas. Every now and then for my birthday, if I was really good that year, it would be done. But it's usually once a year. And, from my mom and dad, grandma and grandpa, down to the grandkids, we know the assembly line. And it's just a little piece of family. Even the grandkids will be like, are we making them this year? And so that to me, I will never give them up. I just put them in a freezer, mom, send them to home with me. It's just like being with family every time you have those. There's nothing like it. So that's the one meal for me.
Food is part of our lives and is part of our cultures. But we need to be the master of our food. We can't let the master be the food. But before we transfer out of nutrition, I want to talk about one more thing. Tell us a little bit about the brain connection and how food can impact your mood and cognition, especially with something like Parkinson's or Alzheimer's or one of these neurodegenerative diseases.
A lot of the foods that you said about anti-inflammation, a lot of the foods, the Mediterranean diet, which olive oils, fish, those good fats that we talk about, fruits and vegetables, non-processed foods, a little bit of those antioxidants that we can find in the darker chocolates, a little bit of red wine, everything in moderation. But all of those help. We reduce the inflammation. The brain can function better. The brain is more responsive to exercise, to keeping its function so that we can maintain the awareness. And if we are not focused on eating foods that are causing inflammation, causing us to feel bad about ourselves, reducing our activity level, and becoming sedentary, then our brain can focus on touching on a little bit of the cognitive exercises that we can do. Because the more energy we have, the more we like to read, the more we like to do different activities. So we need to remember the brain is key to our function in mobility and exercise. And so we need to exercise it. I always tell people the brain is like a muscle. Let's exercise it. So I think that's key. So we need to feed it like we do all the protein in our muscles. We need to feed our brain. And our brain needs fat. Our brain needs carbohydrates. Our brain needs protein. So don't cut any of those things out to maintain a healthy brain.
The body follows the mind. Not only what we were talking about earlier, how it's a mental issue with your feelings of restriction or deprivation, but also the brain needs to function so that you can function. It's interesting. I am in the process of getting an advanced biomechanical specialization, and it is one hell of a program. And I have found that if I am not well fed, it takes me a little longer to grasp something, especially when it gets into the physics, than when I'm fed. So my cognitive function improves. And some of the foods that I've identified that are very helpful for me, the evening before, a nice rounded carbohydrate, like a pasta. I find that if I have that meal the night before, because I do my studies in the morning, and I feel really good on that. But if for some reason my food intake was a little off because of my call schedule, like last night, I wasn't done until it was slightly after midnight when I was done with my day. It's not the same the next morning. I've found that food really does impact how quickly I'm thinking. And I think that people sometimes forget that if you take a step back from all the stimulation that's going on around you, and you consider how your body is responding to your food sources, you'll start to identify the foods that make you feel great and the foods that don't. I just have a couple fun questions and then we'll close it out. We joke all the time about some of the stuff we see on social media, whether they be totally gimmicky exercises or they're legitimate exercises for some people, or they're just unnecessary exercises for most people, but they're popular. So you got to tell me, what is one exercise that everybody freaking raves about? They're like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. But inside you're secretly going, oh, I just really dislike that.
Yes. For me, I will say it, the hip thruster. I have never been a fan. I have done it. I've used the bench, I've used the floor, I've used the Smith rack, the bar, all sorts of different things. And give me a good old fashioned deadlift anytime. I just feel the deadlift in my lower back, in my glutes, in my hamstrings. And if people enjoy the exercise, if people do the exercise well, it is an exercise that can strengthen the glutes, the hamstrings, the hips, the back, if done properly. But when I see the way people struggle to get into that exercise and they don't question it, they go in requesting it, I feel then we have a reason to question why we're doing that exercise. And that's the one exercise I really sometimes cringe a little bit about. If it's done with purpose, if it's done well, enjoy it, but don't get yourself hurt because of the stories of the hip thruster.
Really, that's a really good one. I'll tell you what I thought you were going to say. I thought you were going to say the machines that you sit down on and you do abduction.
Yes.
I don't know why, but I'm equally pleased that you're going to use the hip thrust is a good one. So, okay, I got a couple more for you. This is a fun one. What is a health habit that is totally free that somebody could start today and see an improvement in their life?
Just move. But even easier for me, like just improve your posture, sit up straight. I think that could be something. It's completely free. We all know, we all feel it when we don't have good posture. We usually complain about it, right? People come in like, oh, I have such bad posture. It's free. You can fix it yourself. You don't need to be adjusted. You just roll your shoulders up and back, and that'll really pulls you out of that bad posture.
What's the best piece of advice that you've ever been given about longevity?
Yeah. I'll go back to what I said earlier is train for your age. I think we need to change the way we think, change the way we approach our workouts as we get older. For a little bit there, I was thinking, oh, I used to be able to do this. And then I realized that's not me. And then when I started to train for my age and I started to every day kind of get more and more in tune with my body, I can work out harder, I can work out longer, I can do different things. And that for me has been key, like training for my age, not trying to look at other people, like focusing on me and what I can do and what I want to do.
Another reason as to why we don't have pictures on our websites for before and after. It's not about them. It's about you. It's your journey. It's your unique needs. It's your specific issues. All right. I got one more fun one for you, because you had mentioned your tamales but you live in Italy now.
Yes.
So what's your favorite ultimate food in Italy?
There's just nothing like going out and having a fresh gelato on a hot day. And a real gelato is not some weird, like artificial sounding flavor. I like your pistachio and your nochola, your hazelnut. Just give me the basic, simple flavors, and that to me, I will enjoy anytime. In fact, for my 3-year anniversary here in Italy, I went out and I had myself an amazing gelato, and that was what I will not, feel guilty about at all.
It just reinforces that here you are, master trainer, eating gelato because you can and you know how to do it, and you're not depriving yourself. You're not some crazy freak that doesn't eat anything but kale. To close things up, what would you say to somebody who told you it's just too late to start?
Easy. It's never too late. It's never too late to start. If you're still here, there's something you want to do. There's something to look forward to. There's something that you want to improve upon or you want to keep doing, and that's your reason. So it's never too late because you're not going to stop. You're going to be doing things. So that would be simple words. It's never too late. And again, changing your mindset, changing what you're doing, that's what you need to do.
It's really about mindset. It really is. People are struggling with that because it's hard. It requires a vigilance and a consistency. You have to be an active participant in the outcome of your life. It's very difficult in a world where we have opportunities of distraction in a way that we have never contended with as a species in history. Anyway, I wanted people to know that you are accepting clients. So if you are looking for somebody who can help you, Milly has got this very specific way about her, and you got a chance to really get to know her over the last hour. Check out forgept.com, and she would be happy to work with you. Having said that, Milly, it's been an absolute delight, and I really appreciate you spending time today with me on this call and being such a wonderful guest and sharing your wisdom and your insight and your experience. It has been lovely, and I hope you have a lovely day.
Thank you.
All right, buddy. I'll see you soon.
All right.